I've received a lot of questions about autoimmune disease recently, and really no small wonder because there's quite an increased incidence of autoimmune disease in our country. Over the course of 1988 to 2012, a test which is called an ANA test, which should be done pretty much on every annual physical, so you can look back on your last blood and see that, and it's an indicator of autoimmune disease, and the positives in that test increased almost 50% over the course of that 25 years, 1988 to 2012. So there has been that increase. In addition, in our younger population, just age 12 to 19, there has been a doubling of that ANA level. So it stands for anti-nuclear antibodies, but what it's looking at is your body making what's called autoantibodies. So auto is self, and an antibody, it's like anti, against your body. So it's attacking you, which is what is the definition of autoimmune disease? It is your immune system attacking self, which of course is not the design. The immune system is a very brilliant system in our human body. It's very complex, but when it's functioning normally, it would never attack you. It knows you're the host, you're the friend, and it's the other guys, the infectious organisms and the viruses. Those are the things to attack, not self. But that gets disturbed and disoriented and not functioning the way it should in autoimmune disease, and suddenly your immune system sees part of you, like your thyroid or your colon or your nervous system, as something that should be attacked. So let's get into why. The first thing I think we should look at is the fact that when we're talking about immune system, where is that housed predominantly? The statistic is 70%. It used to be 80%. So somewhere between 70 and 80% of your immune system is housed in your gut. So that's where we want to focus because there's something there going awry. So in our microbiome, which is in your colon, the 60 to 100 trillion microbes or organisms housed there, they are critical for either being supportive to your immune system or weakening to your immune system. And so they're sort of training and regulating your immune system. But when what's called dysbiosis occurs, which is an imbalance of your immune system where there's more bad guys than good guys, then all of a sudden your immune system regulation diminishes, and there's actually cells called T regulatory cells, and they're to, exactly what the name implies, regulate your immune system to say, this is a good guy, this is a bad guy. Get the bad guy, leave the good guy alone. And so they're regulating the immune system. But when you have this dysbiosis, you have this imbalance of the good guys and bad guys, and too many bad guys, that T regulatory ability gets diminished. And then all of a sudden we've lost our distinction between sort of good and bad. So that dysbiosis occurrence, if you will, that affects your immune system in a bad way is particularly linked to rheumatoid arthritis, type 1 diabetes, lupus, MS, and irritable bowel disease. So, inflammatory bowel disease. So that's the microbiome piece. And yeah, so let's go on to point number 2. I've got four major points I want to discuss. So the second one is a leaky gut, which you've probably heard the expression, but what does it mean? Your gut is this, from the mouth to the anus, it's an enclosed system, and it is that way such that your body has the ability to keep bad guys within the confines of that long tube versus allowing bad guys to cross the threshold. So really, as clinicians, we think about the gut as being outside the body, meaning it's not interacting with the bloodstream in a fashion that's sort of allowing this free-for-all of potentially damaging microbes to escape. So there is a barrier that's only one cell layer thick, which is amazing, but the lining of our intestine is this, or the barrier as it's called, is very smart, and that's why I believe 70% of your immune system is housed in your gut. It's to line these so many feet, 20 feet of small intestine, 10 to 11 feet of colon. It's lining that and guarding the gates and saying, who are you? You know, like, let me see if you're good or bad. And when it's functioning normally and that immune system is functioning the way it should, it's like, you're a bad guy. Just, you know, we're either attacking you where you are or we're excreting you into the toilet. You know, that's where you deserve to go. So it's a very brilliant system. But when we have certain inflammatory issues occurring due to diet, chemicals, things that overwhelm that barrier, now you have microbes passing through. So that's the leakiness. Instead of nice guards at the gate that are really holding that gate shut to bad things, now we have this opening, this permeability that's allowing microbes to pass. It's allowing partially digested food to pass. It's allowing toxins to pass, and now it's a free-for-all, and that gets now into your bloodstream, and your bloodstream gets overwhelmed because it's not designed to see all those things. And when it does, the immune system really gets activated, and you can get into this chronic inflammatory profile, and now you're making what's called autoantibodies. So it has to do with the fact that when the immune system of the bloodstream gets overwhelmed, it's just like it gets overwhelmed. It's like suddenly, you know, you're a soldier and you've been dealing with sort of so many of the enemy, and then all of a sudden that 100 X's, you know, and you're just going to start shooting willy-nilly because you're overwhelmed. So in that overwhelmed state, which is actually point 3, so let me finish point 2 and then I'll get into point 3. But suffice to say that overwhelming of the bloodstream with these bad guys from whatever source is enough to get your immune system to the point where it's not acting as sensibly, as brilliant as it should be. When I'm explaining this to patients, a lot of times they say, you know, let's imagine we just kept you up for 3 days and hardly fed you and then gave you an IQ test. You know, you would make silly mistakes, you know, or gave you a math test. You would make silly mistakes because, you know, you haven't slept, you haven't eaten, you know, your brain's not functioning as well as it should. So same thing with autoimmune disease. When the immune system has just been battered and battered and battered, all of a sudden it sees, you know, part of your body and says, oh, that's a bad guy too. But if it was functioning normally, it would never make that mistake. So I hope that makes sense. This particular leaky gut association of autoimmune disease is highly associated with Hashimoto's autoimmune disease, celiac, which by the way has increased 4 to 5 times in recent decades. We're seeing a lot more celiac disease than we ever used to, and type 1 diabetes is also rising. So it makes sense because you know, celiac has to do with degradation of the small intestine, and type 1 diabetes, of course, the pancreas. So both very gut related. So let's get into the molecular mimicry. That's what I was just sort of on the edge of earlier. So what happens is when these microbes cross that gut barrier because of the leaky gut, what happens is they have their own protein structure, and we are of course loaded with a lot of different proteins, so are these microbes. And so that's what I was getting at a moment ago when I was talking about, you know, like being a soldier and suddenly being, you know, inundated with thousands more you know, of the bad guys than you anticipated. You would just get into kind of a frenzy, and that's what happens with your immune system. So these gut microbes cross the barrier, and there's a lot of them, and your immune system is like attack, attack, attack. And again, my description when I would be explaining this to patients is I would draw sort of a diamond shape and say this is the bad guy. This is the protein of the bad guy. And then I would draw another diamond shape, and I would just leave the very tip of one of the points, bottom or top, off. So very similar, right? And Now, if you were, functioning normally, you go, no, that's not the same. One's a diamond, one has a little bit of the tip off of it. It's not the same. And so therefore I know the distinction. That's true until you get overwhelmed and you're really rushed and you're exhausted, right? That's the analogy I'm giving you for the immune system. And in that rush and in that exhausted state, it thinks it's the same. So that's what's called molecular mimicry, one molecule looking a lot like the other. Now, your thyroid, as an example, for like Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is one of the most common autoimmune diseases, the protein in your thyroid is not the same as this bad microbe, but it can be very similar. And it's only in that overwhelmed state that your immune system says, oh yeah, that's a bad guy too, attack. And that's the beginning of autoimmune disease, you see? So that's from the molecular mimicry standpoint, and that's particularly related, I can get that word out, particularly, there we go, linked to Hashimoto's and multiple sclerosis. So now we get into diet, and of course, very, very key. And we're going to go into why we think this dramatic increase of autoimmune disease is occurring. But to finish up with diet, we have in our gut, in our colon, part of the microbiome, gut microbes that really, they love fiber. They love to digest fiber, and from it they make something called short-chain fatty acids. Butyrate is one of the most common short-chain fatty acids. And that butyrate, those short-chain fatty acids support your gut barrier, so preventing leaky gut. They decrease inflammation, and they support the T regulatory cells. So it's like, this is our savior, short-chain fatty acids. And how are they produced? From beneficial microbes that are eating fiber. So it's kind of a bit of a catch-22. You need fiber to have a healthy gut to make the short-chain fatty acids that protect your gut. You see how it goes. And guess what Americans are really terrible at diet-wise? Getting enough fiber. We don't get enough. And by a big margin, we don't get enough. But instead, we're eating what? We're eating junk, we're eating sugar, we're eating highly processed food, and none of that has good fiber. So that in a nutshell, and of course they all kind of tie together, right? Because we're talking about dysbiosis, not enough good bacteria versus bad. Well, why? We just talked about the diet, we talked about the fiber. So it is, of course, very interesting that it all comes back to diet in so many ways. But as we're looking at, as researchers are looking at why this increase, we're way past, we're seeing more because we're looking for it more. It's like, no. It's really dramatically increased, and it is of concern. Not especially in our young people, but we say that because, of course, our youth is our future. And so we're seeing 12 to 19-year-olds, and they're having double the amount of this ANA test elevated in their bloodstream. So it has nothing to do with aging. If you're seeing it in 12 to 19-year-olds, that's when you have to start looking at diet and environment. So the links are considered to be environmental, so more plastics and more chemicals and more pesticides. And then diet-wise, I talked about the fiber, but so much more sugar, so many highly processed foods, a decrease in our vitamin D levels, which is very protective for your immune system, and also more infections. So in a nutshell, what do we know? We know that autoimmune disease is not normal. Yet we know that it's really on the incline. Now I get to kind of complain about the conventional medicine approach, which is that, it looks like you have an autoimmune disease. Let's figure out which one. Okay, doctor, why did I get this? Yeah, we don't know. And especially if you're a woman, they'll say, more women, women get it like 3 times more than men. That's still not an answer. That's a stat, but it's not an answer. It's like, what can I do? What can I do to, figure this out? Can I reverse it? No, you can't reverse it. It just is what it is. Maybe they run in your family. no. By the way, the genetic link is very small, so that does not speak to the increase. So what you can do is all the things we just talked about from the viewpoint of why is my immune system out of control? Why is it inflamed? Why is it in this hypervigilant response? That's where we go here at Root Cause to say, what can we do to calm the waters and not be aggravating the immune system? What does it trace back to? And it's usually, again, very commonly, a multitude of factors that we just sort of go down a checklist to say, what is it, what is it, what is it, what is it? So we look at diet, we look for food sensitivities, we look for imbalance in the microbiome and, kill the bad guys, support the good guys. We look for toxin exposure. Do you have a chronic viral load? A lot of pesticides, maybe mold toxicity. We look at all these things that are acting as burdens on your immune system. And one by one, we take them off. And the beauty of that is a spectrum. So have we reversed autoimmune disease in individuals based on symptoms, blood values, etc.? Yes, we've seen that. Have we gotten people off their medication because they were so much better they didn't seem to need it? Yes, we've seen that. Have we, I'm going in diminishing return here, have we been able to diminish medication for individuals? Yes, we've seen that. Have we met individuals where the best we could do was have them feel better, but they still needed the support of the medication? Yeah, that's less common. We usually do better than that. And even if all of that stayed the same as far as I still need my med, I still have XYZ autoimmune disease, everything we can do to support that immune system and see why it's been overwhelmed and where these body burden stressors have been coming from the diet, from the environment, all these factors that we do have control over. There's the reason to still do that is because when you have one autoimmune disease, you're 5 to 10 times more likely, or maybe 3 to 10 times more likely to get another one. Well, of course you would be, because nobody's getting to the root cause of why you got the first one. But if you can get to the root cause of why you got the first one, you could at the very least prevent others from occurring, which would be a very beneficial thing. I think you can agree. So that's the story of autoimmune disease, how it's very tied into the gut and all the various aspects associated with it. So I hope you found this informative, and if you're suffering from an autoimmune disease, we would be delighted to see what the burdens are in your body that could kind of make your immune system a lot happier and less burdened, less likely to make more, perhaps being able to reverse to the varying degrees that I mentioned the autoimmune. So these are all the factors, options open to you. If you did enjoy this content, please consider subscribing to the channel, giving the video a thumbs up. We're trying to get more subscribers because then more people can see this information and avail themselves of it. I didn't mention one other thing, which is that the drugs for autoimmune disease are, what are they doing? You're being told your immune system is out of control. They don't know why, so they're going to give you a biologic, a drug to suppress your immune system. So what happens when you suppress your immune system? You can have less of your symptoms associated with your autoimmune disease, but what else is more likely to happen? If you suppress your immune system, you're more likely to get infections, you're more likely to get cancer. It's pretty scary. So talk about choosing between a rock and a hard place. Neither one of those sounds very good. So there is this other option that is available to you. And we've found over our 40 years that it works very, very well. So we'd be delighted to assist you or someone you hold dear. Okay, it's been great talking to you. I appreciate you, and we'll talk soon.